I want you to picture a spider web. But this isn't a web made of silk. It's made of rules.
Okay, rules. I'm picturing it.
Invisible, ironclad rules that dictate absolutely every breath you take.
Right.
You are living in 19th century India. If you cross the ocean just get on a boat and sail to see what's on the other side, you lose your caste entirely.
As for getting on a boat?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your social standing just evaporates instantly. And if you are a woman, your very right to exist is often tied completely to your husband's heartbeat. If he dies, you might literally be expected to burn on his funeral pyre.
It's a terrifying image to really put yourself into.
It is. And here is the fundamental problem with a web like that.
Yeah.
If you struggle against it, you just get more tangled up. But if you try to cut it with a knife, the whole structure might collapse and leave you with nothing at all.
Total social anarchy.
Yeah. So the question we are asking today is, how do you wake up a giant that has been paralyzed by this web for centuries? I mean, how do you modernize an entire civilization without destroying its soul?
That right there is the fundamental tension of the Indian Renaissance. We often, we obsess over the political history, Gandhi, the marches, the British Raj.
Yeah.
But before you can have a political revelation, you usually need a mental one.
A shift in the baseline reality.
Exactly. You need to change how people think before you can change how they vote or who they let govern them.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we aren't just reciting dates and names. We are unpacking the intellectual bedrock of modern India. And I should mention right up front, this is a special one. This is a full summary for UPSC, focused by the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel.
Yeah, we are tackling an absolute monster today. Chapter 9 of Spectrums, A Brief History of Modern India.
A general survey of socio-cultural reform movements and their leaders.
The title is dry, sure, but the actual content, it's explosive.
Wow.
It's all about the clash of civilizations, internal rot, and basically the rebirth of a nation.
It really is. And before we jump into the mud here, just a quick mission brief for you listening. If you get value from this deep dive, if it helps you connect the dots for the exam, please subscribe to the Simplified UPSC by PPP YouTube channel.
It is the absolute fuel that keeps this engine running.
And if you are in a position to do so, supporting the channel on Patreon makes a massive difference. We want to give a huge shout out to all our current supporters. You guys do a lot in helping us create such content.
You really do.
Also, don't just listen passively today. Like this video and share your valuable comment below. Let the algorithm know that serious learners are here.
And one last crucial housekeeping note for you guys. Free notes with practice PYQs. Previous year questions are available right now on our public Telegram channel.
Super useful.
Yeah, and to get access to all videos of this series at once, and also their corresponding premium notes in a really organized way, join us on the private Telegram library. Just DM on the Telegram public channel to join.
And those premium notes have detailed notes, extra PYQs, and model mains answers for your mains questions.
Highly recommend checking that out.
All right, housekeeping done. Let's set the scene. We're looking at the 19th century. The British are firmly in control of the subcontinent. But, and this is a big but, you're telling me the biggest problem wasn't actually the British.
Well, that's the controversial part, isn't it?
Right.
See, colonial rule was obviously extractive and brutal, no doubt about that. But the Indian intellectuals of that time, the specific people we're about to discuss, they looked in the mirror and realized that Indian society had severely fractured from the inside out.
Fractured in what way exactly?
Stagnation, complete cultural stagnation. The source material describes a society that was steeped in magic and superstition. The priesthood had a total monopoly on knowledge. Literally, they were the only ones allowed to read or interpret the sacred texts.
Keeping the gates locked?
Exactly. You had rampant idolatry, polytheism, and this incredibly rigid caste system that made any sort of social mobility completely impossible. The text literally calls it a depressing state of affairs.
So the reformers appear on the scene. But who are these people? Are we talking about peasants rising up with pitchforks in the villages?
Not at all. And this is a very crucial distinction for the UPSC syllabus. The social base of this entire awakening was actually quite narrow at first. It wasn't the masses. It was the newly emerging middle class.
The middle class. Now that term gets thrown around a lot today. What did middle class actually mean in, say, 1820?
Back then, it meant people who had stepped into the new administrative economy created by the British. We were talking about government servants, lawyers, doctors, teachers, and crucially, they had access to English education.
Which means they had direct access to Western philosophy.
Precisely. Imagine being a young, smart Bengali man in Calcutta. In the morning, you're reading John Stuart Mill, Voltaire, Rousseau. You're absorbing all these wild ideas about liberty, equality, and fraternity from the West.
Right.
But then you go home and you see your own sister being told she can't learn to read because society says it'll bring bad luck to her future husband.
The cognitive dissonance there must have been incredibly painful.
It was unbearable for them. And that specific dissonance birthed a new intellectual tool, a criterion they used to judge their own culture, which was rationalism.
The test of reason.
Yes. There's a brilliant quote in the sources by Akshay Kumar Dutt, one of the prominent Bengali intellectuals. He famously said, "Rationalism is our only preceptor."
Meaning reason is the only teacher.
Exactly. Basically, if a tradition doesn't hold up to basic logic, or if it actively harms human beings, it goes in the trash. It literally doesn't matter if it's 5,000 years old.
That is a very scientific, almost surgical approach to religion and culture.
It really is. They wanted to replace blind faith with rationality. But, and here is where the movement splits into two distinct streams, they didn't all agree on exactly how to do that. You had two main camps, the reformists and the revivalists.
Okay, break that framework down for me.
The reformists were the forward-lookers. Think of the Brahmo Samaj or the Prarthana Samaj. They basically said, let's use Western rationalism to prune the dead branches off the tree of Hinduism. They were totally fine with borrowing good ideas from the West to fix Indian society.
And the revivalists.
The revivalists, like the Arya Samaj or the Deoband movement for Muslims, they were backward-lookers, but in a very strategic way. They said, we don't need the West at all. Our society was perfect in the ancient past. We just need to strip away all the medieval corrections and go back to that original purity.
So one camp says modernize by looking forward, the other says purify by looking backward.
In a nutshell, yes. But the crucial thing to remember is that both agreed on the immediate targets. Both hated the rigid caste system. Both fought against gender inequality. And both wanted to break the monopoly of the priesthood.
That makes sense. Let's talk about the man who really ignited this whole thing, the pioneer, Raja Rammohan Roy.
The absolute father of the Indian Renaissance.
I was looking at his bio in the notes, and frankly, the guy makes me feel a bit inadequate. He didn't just know English and Bengali. The sources say he knew Sanskrit, Persian, Arabic, Greek, and Hebrew. I mean, why? Was he just showing off?
It wasn't just a parlor trick, I promise you. He needed those specific languages to read the original source texts of all the world's major religions. He learned Hebrew and Greek just to read the Bible in its original form. He learned Arabic to read the Quran.
He was doing primary research.
Exactly. He wanted to find the universal truth that he believed was underlying all religions.
And what did he conclude from all that reading?
Monotheism. He believed that if you strip away the localized rituals and the priesthoods, every single major religion fundamentally believes in one formless God. In 1809, he wrote a famous tract called Gift to Monotheists, Tufat-ul-Muwahhidin in Persian.
And he used Islamic logic in that tract to attack Hindu idolatry, right?
He did.
That is a wildly bold move, using the logic of the Mughals, the former rulers, to critique your own Hindu community.
He was completely fearless. But his real genius was in how he handled Hinduism itself. He didn't just stand there and say, Hinduism is completely wrong. That would have alienated everyone.
Right, so what did she say?
He said, the Hinduism you are practicing right now in the 19th century is a corruption. It's a degraded version. He went back and quoted the Vedas and the Upanishads to prove that the ancient, original Hindu texts actually supported monotheism and formless worship.
That is such a brilliant lawyer's tactic. I'm not attacking the law. I'm attacking your modern, corrupt interpretation of the law.
That was exactly his strategy. He was fighting orthodoxy with its own sacred books. So in 1814, he starts the Atmiya Sabha, the Society of Friends in Calcutta. Then later in 1828, he founds the big one, the Brahmo Sabha, which soon becomes the Brahmo Samaj.
The real headquarters of the reform movement.
No. The Vatican of Indian rationalism, if you will. They even had a physical building. And the trust deed of that building is fascinating for UPSC. It explicitly forbade any graven image, statue, or sculpture inside. No animal sacrifices, no rituals, just prayer, meditation, and reading from the Upanishads.
A completely stripped-down intellectual form of worship. But we can't talk about Roy without talking about his biggest, most visceral battle, Sati.
The burning of widows. It's incredibly hard for us to stomach the details today, but it was highly prevalent in Bengal at the time. Roy was absolutely relentless on this issue.
He didn't just write polite articles about it, did he?
No, he was an activist in the truest sense. He organized vigilance groups, vigilantes essentially. He and his followers would go directly to the cremation grounds and physically argue with the family members, trying to prevent them from forcing the grieving widow onto the burning pyre.
He was really getting his hands dirty.
Oh, he risked his life constantly. The Orthodox elements hated him. But again, his winning move was intellectual and legal. He cited the ancient Hindu scriptures like Manu to show the British Governor-General, William Bentinck, that sati was absolutely not mandatory in the traditional Shastras.
He gave the British the moral and legal cover they needed to ban it without looking like they were just crushing the local religion.
And it worked perfectly. 1829, Regulation 77. Sati is declared illegal and punishable by criminal courts. That is Rammohan Roy's lasting monument.
But then, and the rest of it, in history, Roy dies in Bristol in 1833. And the Brahmo Samaj, well, the notes show it turns into a bit of a soap opera.
It absolutely does. It's a classic case of a succession crisis after a charismatic founder dies. And this is highly high yield for UPSC because the examiners love asking about the exact chronology of these Brahmo Samaj splits.
Right, so who takes the reins first?
First, you have Debendranath Tagore. This is Rabindranath Tagore's father. He formally joins the Samaj in 1842. Now, he is a deeply spiritual man, a philosopher. He revitalizes the whole movement through his Tattvabodhini Sabha, which he merged into the Samaj.
But he's a bit conservative, right?
Exactly. He is inherently a bit traditional. He wants to keep the Brahmo movement strictly rooted in Hindu theology, just a purified version of it.
And then enters the disruptor.
Shub Chandra Sen. He joins in 1858. He's much younger, he's electric, and he is incredibly impatient. He doesn't just want to read the Upanishads. He wants to read from the Bible, the Quran, the Zenavesta in the Samaj meetings.
Expanding it to a truly universal religion.
Yeah, and socially, he was radical. He wanted to encourage intercaste marriages openly. He wanted to tear down the sacred thread that Brahmins wore. He was pushing the envelope way too fast for the older generation.
So you have the old guard, Tagore, and the young Turksen.
And the friction causes a massive spark. 1866 is the first split. Tagore basically pulls rank. He keeps the original property and the original trust, and he calls his group the Adi Brahmo Samaj. Adi meaning original.
Leaving Keshab to start his own group.
Right. Keshab breaks away and forms the Brahmo Samaj of India.
And Keshab takes all the youthful energy with him, right? The sources say he goes to Bombay, to Madras. He really makes it an all-India movement.
He does. He is a phenomenal orator. But then, power and fame do strange things to people. As he gets older, Keshab starts getting a bit authoritarian. He starts claiming he has this direct, divine hookup with God.
Uh-oh, the classic guru trap.
Exactly. And then, in 1878, the unthinkable happens. The controversy that breaks the movement.
The Kuch Behar marriage. Let's unpack that.
Right. So Keshab had spent his entire life preaching against child marriage. He was the main force behind the Native Marriage Act of 1872, which fixed the marriage age for girls at 14.
Okay.
But then, he arranges the marriage of his own daughter, who was only 13 years old.
13? You've got to be kidding me.
13. And not just that, she marries the Maharaja of Kuch Behar, who is also a minor, in a massive ceremony filled with the exact same orthodox Hindu idols and rituals that Keshab had spent 20 years banning.
The hypocrisy of that must have just shattered his progressive followers.
It completely destroyed his credibility. Imagine the betrayal they felt. The younger generation of his followers, brilliant men like Ananda Mohan Bose and Shibnath Shastri, they were deeply disgusted. They basically said, "We're done with you," and they walked out en masse.
And that gives us the second split, 1878.
Yes, they formed the Sadharan Brahmo Samaj. Sadharan meaning general or ordinary. They wanted a strictly democratic organization. No more godmen, no more infallible leaders, just a constitution and voting.
And they're the ones who actually carried on the heavy lifting of education and social reform in Bengal after that.
Exactly. It's a deeply tragic arc for Keshab Chandra Sen. He built so much national momentum and then just burned his own legacy for a royal alliance.
A harsh lesson in practicing what you preach. Let's shift gears a bit. We're still in Bengal, but we are moving from the high-minded, somewhat elite philosophy of the Brahmo Samaj to something a lot more. Well, punk rock.
Punk rock is actually a great description for them.
The young Bengal movement.
We are talking about the radical students of Hindu college in Calcutta during the late 1820s and 30s. And their undisputed leader was a guy named Henry Vivian Derozio.
He is Anglo-Indian, right?
Yes. And he was incredibly, almost absurdly young. He started teaching at Hindu college when he was just 17 years old, and he died at 22.
Wait, 22? That's barely out of college himself.
He was a total prodigy,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a massive firebrand. He looked at his students and basically told them to question absolutely everything. If it's an old tradition, question it. If it's a god, question it. If it's a moral rule your parents taught you, question it.
This sounds like pure French Revolution energy.
It was heavily inspired by the French Revolution. Liberty, equality, fraternity. The Derosians, his followers, were completely radical. They didn't just write essays, they wanted to actively shock Orthodox society.
What did they do?
There are famous stories of them deliberately eating beef and drinking wine, which was strictly taboo for upper caste Hindus, and then literally throwing the leftover bones into the courtyards of Orthodox Brahmin houses just to provoke a reaction.
Okay, that's not really social reform. That's just extreme trolling.
It was pure youthful rebellion. But, and here's the analytical so what, for UPSC, the movement ultimately failed.
Why did it fail? Just too much, too soon?
Partly that. It was way too radical for 1830s India, but mainly because they had absolutely no connection to the real masses of India. Their revolution was entirely bookish.
Right.
They were quoting Voltaire and Thomas Paine to peasants who were literally starving under the zamindari system. They didn't have a constructive on-the-ground program. They knew exactly what they hated, but they didn't know how to build what they loved.
And Derozio was fired from the college, wasn't he?
Yes. The Orthodox parents pressured the management, and he was dismissed for corrupting the youth. He died of cholera almost immediately after. But he definitely left a mark. He is widely considered the first nationalist poet of modern India. He planted the crucial seed that it's completely okay to question traditional authority.
Now contrast Derozio with another absolute giant of Bengal, someone who wasn't about shock value at all, but about just shocking amounts of quiet, relentless work. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar.
The ocean of knowledge. Vidyasagar. This man is honestly my personal favorite from this era. He wasn't a westernized iconoclast like Derozio. He was a deep, traditional Sanskrit scholar. He eventually became the principal of the Sanskrit College in Calcutta.
But he used that very traditional position to break the rules, didn't he?
He did. The first major thing he did was open the doors of the Sanskrit College to non-Brahmins. Up until then, learning Sanskrit was a strict caste monopoly. He argued that knowledge simply cannot be locked inside a caste vault.
But his real life's mission, the thing he is most remembered for, was the women of India.
Specifically, the widows.
We have to understand the context here, right? We mentioned child marriage earlier with Keshab Chandra Sen.
Right. Child marriage was the absolute norm. So you routinely had girls married off at age 8 or 9. If the much older husband died, or even if a young husband died of disease, which happened all the time, the little girl was instantly declared a widow.
And the treatment of widows was brutal.
Barbaric. She was stripped of all jewelry. She had to shave her head completely, wear only a plain white sari, eat bland vegetarian food once a day, and live in total isolation for the next 40 or 50 years. She was treated as an omen of bad luck, a living dead person.
It's horrifying to even think about a 9-year-old going through that. And Vidyasagar decided to fight this.
Legally and theologically. Just like Rammohan Roy did with Sati, Vidyasagar dove deep into the ancient texts. He systematically scoured the scriptures until he found a specific verse in the Parashar Samhita that explicitly sanctioned widow remarriage under certain conditions.
He found the legal loophole in the ancient law.
Exactly. He translated it, printed it, and presented this undeniable proof to the British authorities.
And the result was legislative.
The Hindu Widow Remarriage Act of 1856. It legalized the marriages and legitimized the children of those marriages.
But getting a law passed is one thing. Actually getting society to accept it is another.
And that's where Vidyasagar's true greatness shows. He didn't just stop at the law. He personally organized and funded the first legal widow remarriages in Calcutta. He faced massive social boycotts. People hurled insults at him on the streets. There were even threats to his life.
But he kept going.
He never stopped. He also deeply believed in female education. He was associated with John Eliot Drinkwater Bethune and helped found the Bethune School. Beyond that, he personally organized around 35 girls' schools in Bengal, largely funding them out of his own modest pocket.
That right there is the fundamental difference between intellectual radicalism like Derozio and constructive humanism like Vidyasagar. One just shouts at the darkness, the other actually lights a candle.
That's a really beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And highly accurate.
Okay, we've spent a lot of time in Bengal, the epicenter, but the fire of reform was spreading. Let's travel across the subcontinent to Western India. Maharashtra. The vibe over there was very different, wasn't it?
Very different. In Bengal, the reform was often highly intellectual, debate-heavy, and sometimes flashy. In Maharashtra, it was deeply rooted in the Bhakti tradition.
You mean the tradition of the Marathi saints like Tukaram and Eknath?
Yes. It was less about arguing over scriptural translations and more about emotional equality before God. It was quieter, less confrontational, but perhaps penetrated deeper into everyday society.
The major organization there is the Prarthana Samaj.
Right. Founded in 1867 in Bombay by Atmaram Panaran, actually with some help from Keshab Chandra Sen, who was visiting. But the real leader, the intellectual engine who emerged, was Justice M.G. Ranade.
Mahadeo Govind Ranade. Now, he was literally a judge under the British government, right?
He was. And because he was a senior government servant, he couldn't exactly be a flaming revolutionary. His distinct style was gradualism.
Gradualism, taking it slow.
He deeply believed that you can't force society to change overnight. You change it from within, organically, through constant education and persuasion. He famously said that you can't just reform one part of society like politics while ignoring social rot. It all has to move together.
And to push that, he founded the Indian Social Conference.
Yes, in 1887. This is highly important for UPSC. The Indian Social Conference was essentially the social reform wing of the Indian National Congress. They would literally meet at the exact same venue right after the main political Congress sessions concluded to discuss social evils like caste and child marriage.
So Ranade was the diplomat, but not everyone in Maharashtra was a fan of gradualism. We have to talk about the absolute dynamite of the region, Jyotiba Phule.
Ah, yes. If Ranade was the careful diplomat, Jyotiba Phule was the warrior. He wasn't interested in gently reforming upper-caste Hinduism. He wanted to completely dismantle the hierarchy from the ground up.
He came from the Mali caste, the gardener caste, which was classified as Shudra, so he knew the reality of oppression firsthand, not just from reading about it.
Exactly. In 1873, he founded the Satyashodhak Samaj, the Truth Seeker Society. And his primary target wasn't just bad habits like sati. His target was the caste system itself and the Brahminical monopoly that enforced it.
He actually flipped the script on the whole mythology of the region, didn't he?
It's a brilliant piece of subversion. He took the Aryan invasion theory, which the British and many upper caste Indians loved because it linked them to Europeans, and he weaponized it.
How so?
He essentially said to the Brahmins, you are the foreign invaders. You came from outside, conquered the indigenous people of India, and invented the caste system to keep us permanently enslaved.
Wow.
Yeah. And he championed Raja Bali, who is traditionally depicted as a demon king, defeated by the avatar Vamana in Sanskrit mythology. Phule championed Bali as the hero of the common oppressed people. He represented the indigenous struggle against Aryan conquest.
That is radically subversive, and he codified all this in his famous book, Ghulam Giri.
Ghulam Giri, meaning slavery, written in 1873. And get this detail, he explicitly dedicated that book to the good people of the United States who were fighting to abolish slavery in the American Civil War.
That's amazing. He saw the global connection.
He saw the struggle of the lower castes in India and the black slaves in America as fundamentally the exact same fight for human dignity.
And his partner in this absolute war was his wife, Savitribai Phule.
The absolute mother of Indian feminism. In 1848, Jyotiba and Savitribai opened the very first school for native girls in Pune.
1848, that's incredibly early.
It was, and the upper caste backlash was incredibly vicious. When Savitribai walked to the school to teach, Orthodox men would literally throw mud, stones, and cow dung at her.
Mud and cow dung? Just for walking to a classroom?
Yeah, she literally had to carry a spare, clean sari in her bag. She would get to the school, quietly clean herself up, change into the fresh sari, and then confidently teach the girls. That is what true, unyielding courage looks like.
It really puts our modern complaints into perspective, doesn't it?
Totally. They also opened a home for the prevention of infanticide. Specifically, they saw that young Brahmin widows who had been sexually exploited and became pregnant were committing suicide or killing their babies out of sheer terror of social outcasting. The Phules opened a home to give them a safe, secret place to deliver.
That is just profound radical compassion.
It really is. Now, before we leave Western India, there are a few other quick names from the Spectrum source that UPSC aspirants must know.
Right, let's hit the high-yield facts.
First, Balshastri Jambekar. He's known as the father of Marathi journalism. He started the newspaper Darpan in 1832 to attack Brahminical orthodoxy.
Darpan. Got it.
Then there's the Paramahansa Mandali, founded in 1849 in Maharashtra. They were a secret society because their main rule was breaking caste. At their meetings, members had to eat food cooked by lower caste people. When their secret membership list was stolen and made public, the society collapsed because people were terrified of the social boycott.
Where even the fear of being outed as progressive was enough to destroy you.
Exactly. You also have Gopalari Deshmukh,
Right.
widely known by his pen name Loka Hitawadi. He wrote in a weekly called Prabhakar, fiercely attacking the caste system and saying that if religion does not sanction social reform, then religion itself must be changed.
Powerful stuff.
And finally, Gopal Ganesh Agarkar, a massive intellectual who co-founded the Deccan Education Society with Tilak, but later split from Tilak because Agarkar believed social reform had to come before political independence. He started the periodical Sudrak to spread his rationalist views.
Okay, so that's the Western Indian landscape. Now, while Phule was actively rejecting the ancient scriptures as tools of oppression, there was another massive movement up in North India that was embracing those scriptures with a giant bear hug.
Right.
The Arya Samaj.
Founded by Swami Dayananda Saraswati in 1875 in Bombay, but its real headquarters became Lahore. His famous booming slogan was, "Go back to the Vedas."
Now, you have to clarify this for me. When he says go back to the Vedas, was he saying let's all go back to living in ancient huts and lighting sacrificial fires?
No, not at all. He actually believed the Vedas were the ultimate, infallible source of all true knowledge, including modern science. But, and this is the absolute key to understanding Dayananda, he argued that the Vedas did not support the modern birth-based caste system.
So how did he explain caste then?
He said the original Vedic concept of Varna was entirely based on individual merit, occupation, and character, not birth. A Shudra could become a Brahmin through learning. Furthermore, he argued the Vedas treated women as equals, entitled to education and the sacred thread.
So once again, we see a reformer using the incredibly ancient past to critique the corrupt present.
Exactly. He was aggressively reformist, but his justification was entirely revivalist. He wrote a highly influential book called Satyarth Parhash, The True Exposition.
And he didn't pull any punches in that book, did he?
He attacked everyone. He attacked Orthodox, idol-worshipping Hindus. He attacked Christian missionaries. He attacked Islamic clerics. He wanted to forge a strong, militant, united Aryan India based purely on Vedic principles.
But this aggression, this militancy, it had a severe social cost down the line.
It really did. The most controversial aspect was the Shuddhi movement.
Shuddhi meaning purification.
Yes. The Arya Samaj started organizing these Shuddhi ceremonies to physically and spiritually reconvert people who had converted to Islam or Christianity back into the Hindu fold.
I can imagine that did not go over well with the other communities.
It created massive, lasting communal tension in North India. It's one of the primary reasons why these revivalist movements are analyzed as a double-edged sword. On one hand, they built immense self-confidence and pride among Hindus. On the other hand, they built very high walls between different religious communities.
And even within the Arya Samaj itself, there was a major split after Dayananda died. Right.
Of all things, food and English.
Well, meat eating and Western education, yes. In the 1890s, the movement fractured. One group, led by Lala Hansraj and Lala Lajpat Rai, founded the DAV schools, the Dayananda Anglo-Vedic schools.
Which are still huge today, everywhere. They believed in combining traditional Vedic values with modern English education and science. And they were somewhat tolerant of eating meat.
And the other faction.
The militant faction, led by Swami Shraddhanand, they thought the DAV group was becoming way too westernized. So they founded the Gurukul at Haridwar in 1902. They insisted on strict traditional Sanskrit education, living like ancient hermits, and absolute vegetarianism.
Fascinating how these movements always splinter. Let's move from the fire and aggression of Dayananda to the deep water of mysticism in Bengal, the Ramakrishna mission.
Ramakrishna Paramahansa. He was a very poor, very simple priest at the Dakshineswar Kali temple near Calcutta. He wasn't an intellectual. He was a true mystic. He would go into these deep spiritual trances.
But his approach to religion was incredibly broad.
Uniquely broad. He literally practiced Christianity for a while. He practiced Islam. He practiced various different Hindu sects. And his ultimate experiential conclusion was captured in this famous Bengali saying, Yado mat, Tato path, as many faiths, so many paths.
Meaning all religions lead to the exact same God.
Exactly. But Ramakrishna was barely literate. He didn't write books. He just had this intense magnetic spiritual aura. And that magnet ended up attracting a very brilliant, very skeptical, highly Western-educated college boy named Narendranath Dutta.
The man the world would eventually know as Swami Vivekananda.
The bond between them is legendary in Indian history. Narendranath was a rationalist. He initially questioned and debated everything Ramakrishna said, but eventually the sheer spiritual force of the master completely overwhelmed the disciples' skepticism.
But Vivekananda didn't just stay in the temple meditating, did he?
No, and that is his great contribution. He took Ramakrishna's internal mystic message and weaponized it for external social action. This is the concept of practical Vedanta.
Practical Vedanta. Explain that.
Vivekananda looked around and saw India starving, socially fragmented, weak, and colonized. He famously thundered, "Religion is not for empty bellies. You can't preach philosophy to a starving man." He reinterpreted Hindu philosophy to mean that God exists in every human being. Therefore, service to mankind is the highest form of worship.
Service to Jiva is worship of Shiva.
Exactly. That became the guiding motto of the Ramakrishna mission, which he formally founded in 1897 to carry out humanitarian relief, run hospitals, and build schools.
But before he founded the mission, there was that massive moment, 1893, Chicago.
The Parliament of the World's Religions. It's an iconic moment. You have to really picture the scene. All these senior, very serious, very formal religious leaders from all over the Western world are gathered. And this young, completely unknown Indian monk in bright orange robes stands up.
And he doesn't start with a dry theological argument.
He steps to the podium and simply says, "Sisters and brothers of America."
And the place just erupts.
A literal 2-minute standing ovation before he even finished his next sentence. He completely captivated them. He put Hindu philosophy on the global map overnight. He showed the West that India wasn't just a degraded land of snake charmers and extreme poverty. It was the home of a profoundly deep universal philosophy.
And the psychological impact of that back home in India must have been enormous.
It was a massive injection of national self-esteem. For the first time, an Indian had gone to the West and conquered them intellectually.
He also had a very muscular view of nationalism, right? I remember a quote about needing muscles of iron.
Muscles of iron and nerves of steel. He squarely blamed India's downfall on physical weakness, cowardice, and the absurd caste divisions. He basically told young Indians to stop arguing over whether it was pure or impure to touch someone and to start building their physical and mental strength.
Which is why he became such an icon for the later political revolutionaries.
Subhash Chandra Bose explicitly called Vivekananda the spiritual father of the modern nationalist movement.
All right, we've covered the Hindu reform wave extensively, but this intellectual awakening was washing over everyone. Let's talk about a very weird and wonderful chapter, the Theosophical Society.
The Theosophical movement is so fascinating because it actually starts in New York City, of all places, in 1875. Founded by Madame H.P. Blavatsky, a Russian mystic, and Colonel M.S. Olcott, an American military officer.
Wait, a Russian and an American start an Indian cultural movement?
They were deeply fascinated by Eastern occultism, the Upanishads, and Buddhist thought. They eventually moved their headquarters to Adyar near Madras in 1882.
And their whole vibe was basically telling Indians, hey, your ancient culture is actually way better than our Western culture.
Sociologists call this the pizza effect.
The pizza effect.
Yeah, like how pizza was a simple peasant dish in Italy, went to America, got glorified, and then went back to Italy as a prized cultural export.
Oh, I see.
Westerners validating Indian culture was a huge deal. For the English-educated Indian, who had been told for decades that his culture was backward and barbaric, having these highly educated white people come and say, actually, your Vedas are the peak of human wisdom. It completely restored their cultural self-respect.
And the society really hit its stride in India under Annie Besant.
Annie Besant, an absolute powerhouse. She comes to India in 1893. She threw herself entirely into Hindu revivalism. Her biggest concrete contribution was setting up the Central Hindu College in Varanasi in 1898, where both Hindu religion and Western science were taught.
And that college later grew into something massive.
Yes, Madan Mohan Malviya eventually expanded it into the Banaras Hindu University, BHU, in 1916. Besant became so integrated into Indian life that she actually entered national politics and was elected the first woman president of the Indian National Congress in 1917.
Incredible arc. Now we need to pivot and focus on the Islamic reform movements, because the Muslim community in India was in a very different, very traumatic headspace post-1857.
Very true. After the Great Revolt of 1857, the British heavily targeted the Muslims. The British largely blamed the Muslims for the uprising, seeing it as an attempt to restore the Mughal Empire.
So the community faced severe repression.
Repression and also internal withdrawal. The Muslim elite largely withdrew into a cultural shell. They actively refused modern English education because they saw it as Christian propaganda. As a result, within a few decades, they were falling drastically behind the Hindus in government jobs, law, and modern administration.
Enter Sir Syed Ahmad Khan.
the ultimate pragmatist. He looked at the situation and realized that if the Muslim community didn't adapt to modern English education immediately, they would become a permanent, powerless underclass in India.
So he launches the Aligarh movement.
Yes. His fundamental goal was reconciliation. He wanted to reconcile the teachings of the Quran with modern Western science.
Did he face backlash from the Orthodox clergy?
Massive backlash. They called him a heretic. But his logic was solid. He argued that the Word of God, the Quran, cannot possibly contradict the work of God, which is nature and science. And if there appears to be a contradiction, it means our human interpretation of the religion is flawed and needs to be updated.
Very similar to Rammohan Roy's rationalist approach.
Almost identical in method. To institutionalize this, Sir Syed founded the Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College at Aligarh in 1875.
Which later becomes Aligarh Muslim University.
Exactly. It was designed to train a new generation of Muslim administrators who were devout in their faith but completely modern in their scientific outlook.
But his politics. His political stance was highly controversial, especially later on.
It was. Sir Syed was a staunch British loyalist. He believed that the Muslim community needed the patronage and protection of the British state to catch up.
So when the Indian National Congress was founded in 1885,
he explicitly told Muslims to stay away from it. He feared that in a democratic representative India, the Hindu majority would simply overwhelm and dominate the Muslim minority. He opposed the Congress and created the United Indian Patriotic Association to counter it.
That is a critical point for the UPSC syllabus. The very early seeds of minority anxiety that eventually led to the two-nation theory can be traced back to this exact political stance.
Precisely. Now contrast Aligarh with its complete opposite, the Deoband school. Right, the Darul Uloom at Deoband, founded in 1866 by Orthodox scholars like Muhammad Qasim Nanotavi and Rashid Ahmad Gangohi.
What was their mission?
They were purely Orthodox. They wanted to purify Islam of all foreign, un-Islamic elements. They were not interested in Western education or getting British government jobs. They focused entirely on traditional Islamic scholarship and moral regeneration.
And politically?
Politically, they were fiercely anti-British. Remember, they were born out of the anger of 1857. They issued religious fatwas against Sir Syed's loyalist organizations. And crucially, when the Indian National Congress was formed, the Deoband scholars actually welcomed it and supported the joint Hindu-Muslim struggle against the British.
That is such a fascinating inversion. The socially modern Aligarh movement was politically pro-British and anti-Congress, but the socially conservative Deoband movement was politically anti-British and pro-Congress.
That is the perfect summary. Examiners love testing that specific contrast.
Are there any other Islamic movements we should note quickly?
Just briefly, the Ahmadiyya movement, founded by Mirza Ghulam Ahmad in 1889. It was somewhat similar to the Brahmo Samaj in its universalist approach. They believed in the universal religion of all humanity and opposed the concept of jihad as a holy war, advocating instead for spiritual defense.
Got it. Now we are in the final stretch. Let's do a rapid reconnaissance of the other major communities and movements. Let's start with the Sikhs.
The primary early movement was the Singh Sabha movement, which started in Amritsar in the 1870s to purify Sikhism of Hindu influences and promote modern education, leading to the Khalsa College.
But the real political drama came later, right? In the 1920s.
Yes, the Akali movement. This was a massive, mass-based struggle to liberate the Sikh Gurdwaras. Over the decades, the Gurdwaras had fallen under the control of Mahant's hereditary corrupt priests who treated the shrines and the massive temple wealth as their personal private property, and they were backed by the British.
How did the Akalis fight them?
Through incredibly disciplined, non-violent satyagraha. They formed the Shiromani Gurdwara Parbanda Committee, the SGPC. The Akali volunteers marched into the shrines and faced brutal, lethal police beatings without raising a hand. It was so inspiring that Gandhi sent them a telegram saying, "First decisive battle for India's freedom won."
And they succeeded legally.
They forced the government to pass the Sikh Gurdwaras Act of 1922, later amended in 1925, which handed democratic control of all shrines over to the SGPC.
Incredible. What about the Parsi community?
The Parsis organized the Ranamai Mazayazdan Sabha, the Religious Reform Association, in Bombay in 1851.
The leader there was a very famous name.
Dadabhai Naoroji, the grand old man of India. Along with others, he focused on modernizing Parsi social customs. They campaigned fiercely against the purdah system, championed women's education, and raised the age of marriage. They also ran a powerful journal called Rast Gaftar, meaning truth teller.
The Parsis modernized incredibly fast, didn't they?
Very fast. They rapidly assimilated Western education and became the leading commercial and industrial elites of Bombay.
Finally, and honestly, perhaps most importantly, for the long-term structure of Indian society, we have to look at the movements against untouchability and the fight for temple entry in South India.
This is critical. We talked about Phule in the West, but the South had its own deep fire. Let's start in Kerala with Sri Narayana Guru.
He belonged to the Azava community.
Yes, the Azavas were considered an untouchable caste of toddy tappers. They faced horrific discrimination. The Narayana Guru decided he wasn't going to beg the upper castes for entry into their temples. He was going to assert his own spiritual equality.
The Aruvipuram movement, 1888.
Yes. He walked into the river at Aruvipuram, picked up a simple stone, and formally consecrated it as a Shiva lingam.
I can just imagine the Brahmin priests absolutely losing their minds over that.
They were furious. They rushed him and yelled, "Only a pure Brahmin has the scriptural authority to consecrate an idol."
And his response?
Calmly and beautifully, he replied, "I have consecrated an Azava Shiva, not a Brahmin Shiva."
Absolute mic drop. You can't argue with that.
It was revolutionary. He formed the SNDP Yogam to organize his community. His ultimate famous slogan was, "One religion, one caste, one God for mankind."
Moving from Kerala to Tamil Nadu, you have the justice movement and then the self-respect movement.
Right. The Justice Party was formed to secure government jobs for non-Brahmins, but the real radical edge came with E.V. Ramaswamy Nayakar, famously known as Periyar.
He started out in the Congress, didn't he?
He did, but he left in disgust because he felt it was entirely dominated by upper caste Brahmins who weren't serious about social equality. In 1925, he launched the self-respect movement.
And his approach was very different from Narayana Guru.
Completely. Narayana Guru was a spiritual reformer. Periyar was a fierce, rationalist iconoclast. He directly attacked the caste system, but he also attacked the religion that sanctioned it. He publicly burned copies of the Manusmriti in the Ramayana.
He also pioneered a new kind of wedding.
The self-respect marriages. These were weddings conducted completely without Brahmin priests and without Sanskrit rituals, focusing entirely on the mutual respect and equality between the husband and wife. He really ignited a distinct, proud Dravidian identity.
And to cap off the caste reform discussion, we have to mention the Titan himself, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar.
Ambedkar operated on a whole different intellectual and political level. But in terms of direct social action, the key event for this era is the Mahad Satyagraha in 1927.
This wasn't about entering a temple, though, was it?
No, this was about something much more fundamental. Water. The Chowdar tank in Mahad was a public water tank, but the Dalits were strictly forbidden from drinking from it, even though animals could. Ambedkar led thousands of Dalits in a peaceful march to the tank, and he purposefully drank the water, breaking the caste taboo.
And there was a highly symbolic burning there as well.
Yes. In front of thousands, he ceremonially burned the Manusmriti, the ancient legal text that codified the brutal laws of the caste system. It was a massive declaration. He was saying, we completely reject the legal and moral legitimacy of this oppression.
We have covered just an immense amount of ground today, from the elite salons of Calcutta to the public tanks of Mahad. Let's land this plane with the absolute core UPSC question. The so what?
The overall significance of all these movements combined.
Let's start with positives. Did they actually change India?
Without a doubt. First, they fundamentally broke the cultural stagnation and isolation of India. They dragged Indian society into the modern world. Second, they created this dynamic, forward-looking middle class that eventually provided the entire leadership for the national freedom struggle.
They laid the mental tracks for the political train.
Exactly. And socially, they initiated a massive shift. They championed women's education, they fought child marriage, and they began the long, hard process of dismantling the concept of untouchability and the toxic idea of pollution and purity.
But we have to be objective. What were the limitations? The negatives?
The biggest negative was their narrow social base. For a very long time, these movements were entirely confined to the urban, English-educated, upper caste elites. The massive rural peasantry remained largely untouched for decades.
And the communal aspect.
That is the tragic flaw. The revivalist tendency, the urge to glorify the ancient past to build pride, ended up dividing people. Hindus look back to a glorious ancient Vedic past, while Muslims look back to a glorious medieval Islamic past. They were looking at completely different histories, which eventually made it very hard to build a shared, unified future. It inadvertently fed into communalism.
A vital critical analysis for the mains exams. And for our UPSC aspirants listening right now, what are the specific traps in the prelims?
Three big things to watch out for. One, the exact chronology of the social acts. Remember the order. Sati in 1829, then widow remarriage in 1856, then the Age of Consent Act in 1891, and finally the Sarda Act against child marriage in 1929.
Chronology is king.
Two, the matching questions. They love mixing up the founders and organizations. Make sure you know exactly who founded the Prarthana Samaj versus the Brahmo Samaj. Three, understand the ideological differences deeply. Be ready to contrast Aligarh's modernism with Deoband's traditionalism.
Expert, this has been an absolute marathon of a deep dive, but a completely necessary one.
It really is the story of our awakening as a modern society. It's absolutely worth the time to understand it deeply.
Listeners, if you are still with us at the end of this marathon, you are exactly the kind of serious learner we do this for.
Before we go, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought, something to mull over while you study.
Go for it.
These reformers fought massive, exhausting battles in the 19th century. Battles against caste violence, against the suppression of women, against blind superstition, and for basic rationalism. So ask yourself, as you look at India today, are those battles actually fully won? Or are we simply fighting the modern digital versions of those exact same historical demons?
That is a heavy, very real question to end on. A final reminder, please subscribe to Simplified UPSC by PPP on YouTube right now. If you have the means, support us on Patreon. Again, a massive shout out to our current patrons. You literally keep the lights on for us.
And do not forget to check the public Telegram channel for the free notes and PYQs from today's deep dive. If you want that extra edge, the Model Mains Answers, the premium detailed library, DM us on the public channel to join the private group.
Like the video, drop a comment with your thoughts on that final question, and share this with a study buddy who needs it. We will see you all in the next deep dive. Keep breaking those webs.
Goodbye, and keep learning.